Your personality is shaped by your experiences, and when you've experienced a trauma, this changes your core personality. So what does that mean? That means you might have been a very bubbly person growing up. You might have been, very excited about things, feeling this energy, just really excited about life. And then some things happened, and all of a sudden you're not that way anymore. You might be more pessimistic. You might be less social. You might be more reserved. So this has now changed. The trauma has changed your personality. So now you're acting, you're thinking, you're behaving in a different way. And this is pretty typical for individuals who struggle with any form of trauma. It changes the core personality. So we need to understand what the trauma is and how it impacted the personality. Right? So for instance, if you've experienced this change in core personality, then you might realize that your thoughts are a little bit different, not just in terms of the content, right? Being more pessimistic as an example, or being more fearful or afraid, but rather your thought patterns actually change in terms of the way in which you process your thoughts. What we refer to in the psychoanalytic world, right? The organizational pattern of your thoughts. So you can either be more neurotic in your thinking. So when we talk about more neurotic in terms of, again, thought processes, we're talking about individuals who are more reflective, who are more analytical, who are the ones who can dive a little bit deeper. And then we have more of the psychotic thinking processes. So these people might view themselves in a skewed sense. So for instance, people who struggle with anorexia might look in the mirror and view themselves as looking as if they're 600 pounds, or they feel as though their stomach is sticking out or their butt is sticking out or something is going on that they essentially are viewing themselves very different from the reality of the situation. So it's not psychotic in the sense of what we know about the diagnostic criteria of psychosis, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the psychotic organizational thought process. Again, it is removed from the reality of the situation where the individual's thoughts actually fabricate and construct something that's not based in reality. So we have the neurotic thought process, we have the psychotic thought process, and then we have in the middle the borderline thought process. So this is a little bit of both. These are individuals who maybe are more concrete in their thinking. They're not necessarily able to be analytic as often. Instead, what they're doing is focusing on what they can see, what they can feel, what they know, as opposed to exploring other possibilities. So individuals who are coming in for therapy, such as yourself, you have a particular thought process. You have a way of thinking about what has happened to you, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what your perceptions are. So in doing so, the therapist, at least if they're a psychoanalytic psychotherapist, they're not only going to identify what your thought process or organizational thought pattern looks like, but they're also going to identify what personality structure you generally fit into. Is it the depressive structure, the anxious structure, the psychotic structure? What does that look like? Because each of those structures has its own traits, defense mechanisms, ways in which people relate to other people, so on and so forth. So this is how we better understand the unconscious mind and how we begin to build those foundations in order to dive deeper and to help process that trauma, to help change the patient's core personality, to help them be in line with their ideal and genuine sense of self.